Now, several Republican senators have joined with Democrats in order to push back against President Trump's impending arms deal with Saudi Arabia. That arms deal, of course, would be worth billions of dollars. Now, according to a report in Politico, Senator Chris Murphy, who's a Democrat, is working with Todd Young, Republican from Indiana, to try to stop this arms deal. And the way they're doing it is trying to use a provision in the Foreign Assistance Act. Now, that, of course, would apparently trigger a vote to halt this arms deal. Now, the first step for them, of course, in order to do that, is to get a report on Saudi Arabia and their terrible human rights record, among other things. Now, Young said in a statement, quote, "Our arms sale to Saudi Arabia demands congressional oversight. This bipartisan resolution simply asks the Secretary of State, that's Mike Pompeo, to report on some basic questions before moving forward to them. The ongoing humanitarian crisis and complicated security environment in Yemen requires a sustained attention, and we cannot permit U.S. military equipment to worsen the situation." Now, it is important that he mentions Yemen because right now there is a famine going on in Yemen thanks to the Saudi Arabian blockade. Now, Murphy and Young both serve in the Foreign Relations Committee, and Young chairs the Senate GOP's campaign arm, which is an organization generally supportive of the president and his policies. Now, on this, and that's important, pointing out that basically he is there generally in his position to support Republican presidents in whatever they do. In this case, not doing that. Not doing that. He's actually taking a good stance, and that is against President Trump. And I'm not saying it's good because it's against President Trump. And what I'm saying is that it's good simply because it actually takes a good, bold stand against what's happening in Yemen. Now, Murphy and Young are among a bipartisan coalition of senators who support reducing the United States' role in Yemen and stopping arms sales to Saudi Arabia. Now, the main push for this wasn't necessarily Yemen. It actually was because of the killing of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Now, that actually, I think, woke Washington up from its stupor, and they realized, oh, Saudi Arabia, it turns out they're not the good guys. They're not really a great regime there. Turns out they have massive human rights abuses. They still murder people, cut off their heads for apostasy and witchcraft, and they cut off people's hands for stealing. They execute people for adultery. I mean, this is a fundamentalist, horrifying regime. And now Washington's like, oh, wait, no, since they killed one of ours, a Washington Post journalist, well, now we have to do something about it. But hey, you know what? I'll take it. We shouldn't be selling weapons to Saudi Arabia anyway, especially since those weapons have been documented being used against the civilian population in Yemen. Now, Murphy had said the Trump administration had, quote, been given effectively a blank check to the Saudis, turning a blind eye to the brutal murder of Jamal Khashoggi and allowing their ballistic missile program to expand. The process that we're setting in motion will allow Congress to weigh in on the totality of our security relationship with Saudi Arabia, not just one's arms sale, which is really important, and restore Congress's role in foreign policy making. Now that is important. Thank you. See, the problem here is that since at least the Iraq War, Congress wasn't doing their job in preventing constant warfare in the Middle East. And of course, then again, if they had that power, would they actually use it? My guess is maybe not. But they haven't had that option since the executive branch has basically been gathering more powers to, expand conflicts than they should have constitutionally, right? And now first, of course, with George Bush. George Bush was pretty bad, got us into 2 unfunded wars, but you can't ignore the role of President Obama, who had promised to end those wars and actually didn't. He instead continued those wars and actually ramped up the use of drone warfare. They massively increased the drone program. And, of course, when Donald Trump got into office, He also expanded the drone warfare program, and that caused even more civilian deaths. And so you had this long line of executive power when it came to launching these attacks, signature strikes, etc. And so I'd like to see a lot of that power return to Congress, where it actually should be. And besides, here's the thing, right? Now, the irony of Donald Trump is, of course, he promised to put America first, right? And to not get us into more wars, or to not continue the failed policy, foreign policy of the past, right? Now, if you're a conservative who's against endless war, and they do exist, by the way, you're likely not happy with Donald Trump. You shouldn't be happy with Donald Trump, okay? Because, again, he's all in on helping the Saudis with their genocide in Yemen. I mean, think about it this way. You're actually helping create more terrorism when you do that in the Middle East. When you bomb the Middle East, or when your weapons are used to kill innocent people, you're going to see USA on that bomb. Who do you think you're going to go after? And right now, millions of innocent Yemenis are being starved by the Saudi blockade. And the whole thing is completely inhumane. And of course, there have been calls from the left, Ro Khanna, Bernie Sanders, as well as the right wing, to end our involvement in that conflict. And normally, look, when we talk about bipartisan, right? In this case, bipartisanship is actually a good thing. Most of the time, it's to pick our pockets. In this case, it's actually good because here you have both sides interested in stopping our involvement in the genocide in Yemen. And look, you even have Lindsey Graham. And you guys are probably wondering why there's a big old picture of Lindsey Graham. It's because he's even on board. Now, this is a guy who at most points over the last few years has had his lips firmly glued to Donald Trump's behind. Even he is saying, I don't agree with Trump. We should not sell weapons to the Saudis. I mean, when even Lindsey Graham is going up against Donald Trump, that is a major defection, right? And also, I think a win for progressives, who, as usual, lead the way. That's why we're progressives. And in this case, of course, trying to make sure that we don't sell weapons to a brutal regime and that are using them to kill people, innocent people. Now, if this passes the committee and gets to the floor, which it hasn't yet, there is a chance that even if it passes, which I don't know with Mitch McConnell, I mean, he's literally known as the Grim Reaper when it comes to this. There is a good chance that it could be vetoed by Donald Trump. And so that's where it comes into MAGA guy, anti-war conservatives. If you're there, and I know there's got to be some of you who were, voted for Donald Trump because at least he's not going to get us into another disastrous war. At least he's not going to support brutality, right? And it's going to stop the immigration crisis. Well, how do you stop millions of innocent Yemenis, or tens of thousands of Yemeni refugees from trying to come over here? You maybe look at the root of the problem. The fact that we're allowing and selling weapons to a regime that is literally bombing them to death. So if you're a MAGA guy and you're worried about that stuff, well, it's your turn to call them out. I mean, and some of you have, to be fair, but where's the rest of you? Where's all of you anti-interventionists on the right? It's your turn to shine. Your turn to tell Donald Trump that you are not interested in continuing this bloody genocide in Yemen. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.